why we're here, what's the significance of being here. So, a little bit of sort of chronology, I suppose. So, last month, this guy called Wango decided that he was president of the National Assembly, but he decided that he had the right to become the national president of Venezuela. So he declared himself president of Venezuela, no mandate, whatever. A guy with no sort of profile, no background, but apart from being sort of educated and prepared by the US. And straight away, all the sort of major capitalist powers, but specifically Trump, but also, shamefully the UK, Jeremy Hunt, the Canadians, the Brazilians sort of recognise him as the legitimate leader of Venezuela, with no genuine mandate whatever. So it was apparent to lots of people that this was basically a coup attempt to roll back the gains of what was called the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela. So this is an event of real historical importance. I think that the importance about Venezuela is that for decades under Hugo Chavez, it was like a symbol, a beacon to the rest of the world. That you could say no to neoliberalism. So around the world since the 1990s, on every continent, lots of people have been sort of ground down under the heel of neoliberalism. But in Venezuela, you had an authentic attempt to try and create an alternative, and something that inspired people in Venezuela and inspired people around the rest of the world. So I think it's in the interest of everyone, the sort of progressive movements on the left, to defend the situation in Venezuela and to do our best to thwart what's going on there. So in terms of a little bit of historical background, so in about 30 years ago, there was an event in Venezuela called the Caracazo in 1989, where the IMF imposed austerity on Venezuela. A massive increase in austerity, unemployment, massive increase, and the people of Venezuela rose up ultimately against a sort of neoliberal regime. And there was a horrendous massacre, about 3,000 people killed, and the status quo was reimposed. But the sort of rebellious movement didn't go away. So in 92, Hugo Chavez sort of first came to prominence, and he led an attempt to try and overthrow the sort of neoliberal, sort of pro-American regime. And although he was thwarted and captured, he managed to inspire the Venezuelan people, because he famously gave a speech where, with his iconic red beret, he said, well, I failed, but for the moment. And that in itself was a massively inspiring moment for the Venezuelan people. Now, shortly afterwards, the president, he had to resign because of corruption. Because the thing is that Venezuela for decades has been mired in corruption, propped up by the Americans. So Chavez was really the symbol of freedom for the Venezuelan people. So eventually the regime was forced to release him in about 94, I think. And then in 98, he stood for the presidency, and he won by about 60%. And that was a real sort of turning point for Venezuela. And then in the first attempt to overthrow, now again, in terms of context, we need to see the events of this year as not out of the blue, not unusual. It's part of a sequence of attempts by the American imperialist power to thwart what's going on in Venezuela. So the first real attempt was in 2002. Chavez was in effect kidnapped by the army, taken off to a sort of secret location. And the ruling class in Venezuela thought, job done, we managed to get rid of this sort of irritating sort of guy. But unfortunately, they didn't back on the incredible response of the people of Caracas, who formed the barrios, which is the poorest part of the city. They sort of marched en masse down to the city centre, and they demanded that Chavez be released. And the powers hadn't considered this, so they found themselves sort of besieged, and ultimately they had to concede to this massive mobilisation. So a great example of the support that Chavez had at the time in 2002. So he was returned to power. The ruling class sort of gave up temporarily for a few months. But then in the same year, 2002, they tried again. They had a sort of a boss's strike, a shutdown. But again, that sort of failed. So by that time, sort of Chavez was secure in power basically, and it began to roll out what became known as the Bolivarian Revolution. Bolivar, named after Simon Bolivar, a great sort of hero of independence in Latin America in the sort of 19th century. And again, it's like a beacon of hope in the whole of the continent of Latin America. Some real authentic achievements of this Bolivarian revolution. I think at one point in the early 21st century, Venezuela was ranked equal with Uruguay as the most equal country in South America. And there was a scheme known as the missions, where in health, education, welfare, there was a genuine increase in living standards in Venezuela. So, of course, the BBC today, full of lots of stuff about Venezuela, the poorest country this side of the end of the solar system. But they don't put it in the context of the real achievements of the Bolivarian Revolution. But of course, the American ruling class is never going to give up. So with Trump in the White House, that was almost the sort of signal to have another go at the Chavista regime. So when Chavez dies in 2013, Maduro takes over. So Maduro is the current president. Now, I'm not uncritical of Maduro, although we should definitely back him against Americans. We should accept that the Venezuelan regime is not perfect. You could even question about whether it's genuinely socialist. But I think the point is it's certainly preferable to what preceded it, and it's certainly preferable to a lot of the other regimes in Latin America. Again, I think in terms of the context, we need to understand that Chavez was not on his own in Latin America at the time. There was a sort of what became known as the pink tide, a wave of sort of leftist, centre-leftist regimes. So you had Lula in Brazil, in Ecuador, in Bolivia, you had sort of left-wing regimes that again raised the standards of the people after decades of military dictatorship. But I think, unfortunately, the situation is that with the recession of 2008, 2009, we're all suffering from, there's been an attempt around the world to try and restore neoliberalism, and to roll in Latin America to roll back the achievements of the Pink Tide. So the Workers' Party in Brazil sort of toppled last year, and you got the rise of power of a seriously nasty president in Brazil called Bolsonaro, the sort of quasi-fascist, homophobe, and I think from the viewpoint of the US, Bolsonaro's victory in Brazil was the signal that okay, now we need to move against Venezuela. What you've been seeing is the coordinated attempt, I think, by Washington, Brazil, and also Colombia, where we've got another seriously nasty regime, to encircle, to besiege Venezuela, and to bring down the Chavista regime. So, I think that the fact that Guaido made his usurpation, basically, to try and take over last week, but Maduro is still there, is a sign that the legacy of the Chavez years means a lot to the Venezuelan people, and they're not going to concede easily. So a huge amount of pressure on Maduro from the UK, from the US, from Canada, from Brazil. In some ways, the world's most powerful state reigns against Maduro, and the fact that he's managed to cling on, I think tells us that the Venezuelan people are invested in that regime. And although they are suffering, we should bear in mind that the responsibility for that primarily lies in Washington, not any mistakes that Maduro himself might have made. He clearly has made mistakes, but the US has been trying to bring down that regime for decades. And I think it's in all our interests to defend the Venezuelan regime, apart from anything else, because in terms of, for most people in this room, what you want to see in the UK is a Corbyn government. And what's always thrown at the concept of a Corbyn government is look at Venezuela. If Maduro is brought down, it's damaging to the entire Corbyn project in the UK. I think there's an organic link between Corbyn and Venezuela, which is really important. We need to defend that. And also, we need to be aware that the British ruling class is a seriously nasty player on the world scene. So you've got to be aware that the Bank of England has withheld the gold from the Venezuelan regime. Jeremy Hunt straight away back in the Guaido coup. So I think it's in the interest of the Venezuelan people, it's in the interest of us that we back Maduro and do whatever we can to prevent Trump ultimately getting his way in Venezuela.
Thanks a lot, Sean. Yeah,
right, well, if you ever be a speaker anywhere, never go second. In fact, this is nearly as bad. Well, it's not as bad as in London a few weeks ago. I was the 7th speaker, and Tariq Ali was among the speakers at the end of the Anyway, so we'll have a go. I mean, when you talk to people and you say, even to some of my friends who are kind of quite reasonable people, because I tend to have reasonable people as friends, oh, I'm doing a meeting on Venezuela. It's as if you're going to defend the slaughter of the firstborn. That is how Venezuela is projected today. You really think it is the basket case of all the countries in the world. And I just want you to, I'll say back to them, well, yeah, I'm going to defend Venezuela, but Venezuela isn't a country that kidnaps people in an embassy abroad, tortures them, and then saws them up into bits. Venezuela isn't a country that never in its history has had an election. Never in its history has had an election. Venezuela's had 25 in the last 20 years. Venezuela is a country where women are treated as chattels. And Venezuela isn't a country where public executions and beheadings take place. That's Saudi Arabia. Listen to the criticisms of Saudi Arabia and you fall. It falls on deaf ears. And also, by extension, I could say, I'm not here to defend a country where they have a presidential election, get this, and the winner gets 3 million votes less than their competitor. That's Trump and Clinton. Just think of that. If that had happened in Venezuela, that the president had won an election by gaining 3 million votes less than his competitor, can you imagine what the public or what the media would be saying? Now, Sean has given a really excellent historical perspective on it, and I think we have to treat it as an historical perspective because Venezuela isn't a pop-up issue that's suddenly come from nowhere. And just reflecting on my limited time in Parliament, I think if you trace it back, and if you are interested in Latin America, then the real first warning light went off in the year 2009. And there was a coup in a country which people are not really aware of, and it's not on the agenda, a little country called Honduras. And I raised that issue of the coup in Honduras, in which a mildly reformist president had said, I'm going to boost the minimum wage, and I'm also going to look at democratizing the constitution. And in turn, the reaction of the Americans, and let's be absolutely straight to it, was Obama and Hillary Clinton. So all those people who express, oh, it would have been different under Obama, have got to understand where history is. In fact, what a tragedy that Obama, however widely read, he's obviously read the great Mark Twain, who said, brilliant phrase, America cannot have an empire abroad and be a republic at home. If you have a reactionary foreign policy, it inevitably means the same for your domestic policy. So I raised it in Parliament, and the response of the then Labour administration was absolute silence. Nobody was interested in criticising Obama or Hillary Clinton. So when you reflect, if you are a student of Latin American history, 2009 represented the first successful attempt at rolling back what Sean has called the pink tide. And what's interesting really for the students of politics in Latin America is that in 1823 something was developed called the Monroe Doctrine, where the infant republic of the United States turned to Europe, Spain, France, Britain, and said, keep out of Latin America, this is our backyard. How interesting that a country which values modernity, advanced thinking, like the United States, still allows a policy framed in 1823 to determine its policy in Latin America. And we've got to say, through a mixture of financial, political and legal manipulation, that reaction, with a capital R, reaction, supported by the US State Department, has triumphed in Paraguay, Argentina, Ecuador, and as Sean said, the really worrying one for us, Brazil, and that I would call extreme reaction has been confirmed in Colombia. Brazil and Colombia, absolutely central. They represent a pincer around Venezuela. But the truth is this, Venezuela has been, in some respects, a substitute Cuba for much of the American establishment. The pledge to bring Venezuela down, and you've got to say, well, why do they get so fixated about Venezuela? And there are a couple of reasons, but the main ones are this. Number one, Venezuela has acted as a cornerstone of the alliances within Latin America that have attempted to kind of unshackle themselves from American domination. It's given Venezuela a lesson to other countries how the power of the oligarchs, and the oligarchs are tremendously powerful in Latin America, how their power can be challenged and the use of the state used in a progressive way to combat things like illiteracy, poor health, etc. And if you follow again Latin American politics and all the elections that happen in Latin America, both fixed and fair, then Venezuela is part of the conversation in every country where there's an election. But the biggest thing of all is that Venezuela's got the largest oil reserves of any country in the world. And if you think that's just an incidental, then you are absolutely wrong. It is both a blessing and a curse for Venezuela. So we now find that Venezuela is and has been in the crosshairs of what we call the US empire and Donald Trump. And what I'm pleased about, in a way, absolute silence on the Honduras in the beginning of the process, but at least in the Labour Party, we had leading figures in the shadow cabinet actually coming out and publicly condemning any attempt at a coup in Venezuela. How the Labour Party has shifted. And I pay special tribute, actually, to an individual, Chris Williamson, who has really stuck his neck out, attacked by people within the Labour Party as well for the stance he's taken, and then smeared with the charge of anti-Semitism, etc., etc. I think it's a tragedy. But on the other side of the coin, how interesting that those two intellectual giants of the Labour movement, Mike Gapes and Angela, this is serious. At least we're both there, the intellectual giants of the new movement, because that will guarantee its absolute failure. Mike Gapes and Angela Smith, they both mentioned Venezuela in the reasons why. That I once challenged Angela Smith. I said, I'll come down to your constituency and debate Venezuela, because I'll tell you this, I don't really think she knows where Venezuela is. I think she struggled to go from Sheffield to bloody Rotherham, and never mind finding where Venezuela is. Unfortunately, she didn't take up my challenge. Now, when we come to the essence of the matter, we've got to be absolutely clear. Venezuela is not perfect, and we'd be foolish to say, and we've got to be absolutely honest on this. And privately, I've said this to Venezuelan comrades, but I never appear in public and say this, because I often look at the left in Europe who loves lecturing people. Oh, you want to do that, like Gary Enfield, you don't want to do that, you want to... And I just say, whoa, what have you achieved? Just have a bit of humility. So your criticism is private. So there is criticism about the way they've handled the exchange rate. They've not managed to diversify the economy, which is, as I'm going to explain, 90% dependent on oil. And they've not addressed, got to be honest about this, the issue of corruption in the way they should have done. And even picking up a point from my friend George Galloway, they haven't really addressed the issue of violence on the streets, and they've been basically treated some criminal elements with kid gloves. And he compared the discipline and the peace in Cuba compared to the chaos in Venezuela. I think he makes some strong points. So there are problems, both in terms of, and hey, at the end of the day, history throws up a Chavez once in every few decades. So whoever's going to take over has got a kind of real job. But if we have those honest criticisms, we've got to also say this, that the very strength of Venezuela is its vulnerability as well. And I've mentioned about the 90% of its income derived from oil. So where I have access to the oil industry or the oil price has got a direct effect. And I think we've got to bear this in mind. When Chavez died, the price of a barrel of oil was about $100. Okay? It'd been higher, but it was $100. Within a very short time under Maduro, and that's nothing to do with Maduro, it dropped to $30. Just think that one through. 2/3 of your income has been wiped out. And that didn't happen by accident. Because if you follow OPEC and the role of Saudi Arabia and the manipulation that Venezuela was subjected to through the American and Saudi Arabia alliance, you soon realize that Saudi Arabia was acting in the interests of America to force down the price of oil. And further than that, and these sanctions that people are completely forgetting, and by the way, let's be absolutely straight, sanctions are illegal. Understand that. In international law, sanctions are illegal. And these just didn't start last week. Obama started them in 2014. And there's been a steady ratcheting up of those sanctions. What does it actually mean though, Carl? I'm glad you asked me that. What it actually means is this, that this ain't one or two individuals, because this is how they say, we're targeting one or two individuals. No, they've targeted Venezuela itself. And the thing is this, that they've restricted Venezuela's ability to operate on the financial markets, to draw resources, to recapitalise and restructure their oil industry. They've slowly throttled the life out of it over a few years' time. So when you get the price of oil dropping, and you get a direct assault on the oil industry, and making sure it hasn't got the capacity to renew itself, you're going to be in deep trouble. And you've also got, as Sean said, the Bank of England, acting in a non-political way, of course, freezing about $1.5 billion in gold in the Bank of England. I've never heard that one before, but they've done it this time. And who's paying the price of this? The people of Venezuela. It's as simple as that. So when you see Branson organising this pop concert tomorrow, I'll tell you what, he's organising it in a province in Colombia that has 75% unemployment. Hey, Branson, do something about that. We know what your game is. We know what your game is. There'll be lucrative franchises for Branson if Guaido finishes up running Venezuela. And at the same time as that kind of economic war, which has been waged on Venezuela, there's been a media campaign, the like, I've got to say, comrades, the like of which I have never, ever seen. And when you think about it, you just have to say, we expect it of the right wing. You know, but I'll tell you what, when the BBC is acting in a sustained, endless way, I'm not the world's greatest technological expert, but I've got BBC News on my phone. There's virtually a story every few days on Venezuela, and if there isn't, they'll run one that they showed a week ago. It's just endless. It's endless. And The Guardian as well. I've always had a thing about The Guardian, so don't let me kind of go off on one tonight. So we've got to say this to you, that your average person in the street, the torrent, unless they understand the facts, the sheer torrent of propaganda against them really makes people shaky. So our first job, whenever we come into contact with people, is to argue the truth. And I just chip in again with the people. I'm far older than most people in the room. I won't look at those who I'm younger than. But I remember a year 1973 and a country called Chile. And if you look back at what happened in 1973 in Chile, where you had a government that refused to bend the knee to the United States, where you had a government that was subjected to economic sanctions, this is the script we've heard before, and where you had a government that the United States tried to bring down, that's just what they did. And if you look at the literature coming out of Kissinger and various other people at the time, their key phrase was, "We will make the economy squeal." They've learned the lesson. Now, I don't want that to happen again. And I don't want people to be murdered because, hey, I'm telling you, this ain't kindergarten politics. If the right are successful in Venezuela, people like us who are sat in this room listening to talks tonight, our equivalent, sat in Caracas or wherever, a lot of them will be shot. Don't make any mistake about that. That's what happened in Chile, that's what happened in Venezuela. So I don't want to see that. And I don't want to see political refugees landing here like they did from Chile in 1973-74. And I don't want to see, as Sean said, a boost to neoliberalism all around the world. So I would argue that we can't allow this to happen again. All right, we're small, whatever, we're a marginal issue, but we can argue in whatever way you can. And I'll leave you with two pieces of information. For those who believe that this is all about a humanitarian crisis, I will use the words of John Bolton. And John Bolton is one of the most evil politicians in the world. And the other bloke, who's John Abrams, is basically a war criminal and was judged by the Americans to be a war criminal. And when you put Trump on top of that, you've got a real toxic mix of individuals. John Bolton on Fox Business News on January the 28th. "We are in conversations with major American companies right now. It would make a difference if we could have American companies producing the oil in Venezuela. It would be good for Venezuela and the USA." Hey, I think that is a clue, only a small clue, as to what is happening in Venezuela. The second piece of information is this. A recent Interlaces poll, excuse my French, Spanish, that's Spanish, in early January, pointed out that 86% of Venezuelan people oppose military intervention, and that 81% are against US sanctions. Now, our demand is quite simple at this time. It's a very, very simple demand. Our demand is this: that the Venezuelan people should decide their own future, not Donald Trump. That's quite a simplistic demand, and I think if you said it to the vast majority of people, if you could get through all the propaganda and just say, do you think Trump should decide the fate of 23 million Venezuelans, or do you think 23 million Venezuelans should decide their own fate? Most people would agree with us. We know what Trump's after. He doesn't own Venezuela. We shouldn't let the people of Venezuela down. We've already seen Mexico and Uruguay saying, let us host talks to sort this thing out. We've even seen the Venezuelans offer to be in talks as well. And I just end on this in the words of Martin Luther King. At the end of the day, it's not the words of our enemies we remember, it's the silence of our friends. Let's remember that. Thank you.